All right, hello. I'm just going to give everyone a minute to join the webinar and we are going to get started. Welcome to How to Heal from Your Divorce so that you can be ready for your new relationship. So I am just going to give everyone a minute. Hi, Donda, how are you? Hey, Michelle. Hi, Tolu. Welcome. Welcome to the webinar. Really excited to be here with you. Just a little housekeeping for those of you that are on. So the webinar format is going to be a Q&A, so you can type your question or answer or comments into the chat box. So hopefully you can find that. If you cannot find the chat box, just let me know and I will point you to it. And once we get started with the material, if there's time at the end of the webinar, then I might give you an opportunity to come on live and get some coaching after we go through the material. Hey, thank you. Donda says she likes my glasses and my hair. Thank you. The hair is new, the glasses not so much, but I appreciate it. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started now. I think everyone who is trying to join is on. And so we're here to talk about healing from your divorce. And I want to start by kind of talking a little bit about my story, which at this point, it's like, I feel like my journey just continues to evolve faster and faster and faster. So it's like my story gets longer and longer, but I'm going to kind of limit it to like the divorce and my healing process. So there's a lot more to my story, but for the sake of time and the purpose of this webinar, I'm really just going to tell you about the part that's most relevant to the healing process. So I got divorced in 2015 after being married for 17 years. And prior to those 17 years of marriage, I grew up in a family where my parents got divorced, right? And my dad got remarried. There was a lot of dysfunction in that family as well, right? And now looking back, hindsight is 2020. So I can talk about my childhood dysfunction in relationship to my marriage now and to my divorce now, because I can see it. But at the time of my divorce, I had no idea how all of these things kind of played in together, how they created this need for me to really take a really good look at myself and understand what needed to be healed in my life, right? So when I got divorced, it was my ex-husband who filed for the divorce. I was one of those girls who was like, I'm married, it doesn't matter what's going on, I can handle it. I can handle whatever comes. I can, like I was over functioning in the marriage. I was being responsible for everything. While my ex was kind of like doing his own thing, right? Being self-absorbed, being selfish. He actually received a diagnosis somewhere in the middle of our marriage of bipolar, which I really believe now that I look back, that he was actually a narcissist and should have been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. But I understand, knowing therapists and the conversation in the therapeutic world is not to diagnose narcissistic personality disorder because there is no treatment for it. So they really can't help people if they diagnose them with that. So typically they would diagnose them with borderline or with bipolar so that they can give them some medication. Well, my ex was diagnosed with bipolar, but he would not go on any kind of therapeutic treatment or any kind of medication, or basically was completely under responsible for his own crap, right? And I mostly took that on as the healthy person in the relationship, or I thought I was healthy, and over functioned and tried to keep everything together and tried to hold everything together, tried to take care of the kids, tried to take care of the finances whenever we went in those up and down cycles. Well, towards the end of the marriage, I really started setting some boundaries because my ex started to, in a sense, because he had been enabled so much, started going overboard with his anger and his rage, and it started to impact my children who were becoming teenagers and kind of going through their own teen stuff. So I started to set some boundaries. Mostly because I realized this was starting to impact the kids. I had thought, well, if it was just me, I can handle it. But when I started to see the kids being impacted, I was less willing to just handle it. So I started setting boundaries. And the more I set boundaries, the more he pushed back on the boundaries and would escalate situations. And the situations escalated to the point that I moved out for a while, and I wanted us to go to like a really intense therapeutic treatment to kind of work things out. And during the time that we were doing that, he secretly filed for a divorce. And so that's like, in a nutshell, how my divorce happened. And I remember when that happened, I was so blindsided by it because I had put so much trust in my ability to handle things and hold things together and keep things going, that when he filed for the divorce, I was kind of like, wait, what just happened here? And that was kind of like my rock bottom moment where I realized that, oh, I don't have it together. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And so that's kind of what sent me on a search to figure out what's really going on in my life. So I went to therapy for a while. I got some answers, but they really weren't quite satisfied. And then I started like researching on the internet. I heard about codependency, was actually the first thing I heard about. I started following this coach online who talked about codependency, and he really explained my experiences very, like, so close to my experiences. And as I learned about codependency, I learned about narcissists and narcissistic abuse. And that really brought things home. And I realized, oh my God, not only was my ex a narcissist, I had encountered other people who were narcissists in my life. There were members of my family who were narcissistic, and that I had lived in those cycles of narcissistic abuse and childhood dysfunction pretty much my whole life. At that point, I was 39 years old, and that was the first I was hearing about all of this. So I really decided I wanted to turn my life around, because I was like, if I've gone for almost 40 years just thinking that this kind of like twilight zone of craziness was normal, what would my life have been, or what could my life have been if I had really been in a healthy existence? So I really devoted myself to learning what had gone wrong in my past and healing that. And that led me to becoming a certified coach. I certified in trauma recovery. And then I started my coaching practice, and now I'm currently certifying with the Life Coach School. So basically that journey, right, took me through all the certifications, the books, the learning. First of all, pretty much for the first 3 years, just applying it to myself and becoming healthy, and then starting it to apply to my clients and the women that I help. And one of the things that I use to evaluate healing is not time. A lot of people tell me, well, I've been divorced for 5 years, I'm healed, or I'm healing, or I was single for 3 years, so I'm healed and I'm healing. Well, what I used in my life and what I use in my clients to evaluate how well they're healing is two things. One, how are you feeling? What is your feeling state on a regular basis? And two, what are the results that you're getting in your life? Because you can think you're healed, because we can allow any thought, we can believe any thought that we want. If you had asked me before my divorce if I was a healthy, normal, well-adjusted person, I would have told you 100% yes. Like, I used to tell people, oh my goodness, I went through so much when I was a kid, but I'm so glad I'm over that now. I used to say, oh yeah, that didn't affect me at all. I turned out great. That's the phrase. So many people use that phrase. Oh yeah, all that happened, but I turned out great. And really, that's a form of denial. What I really found when I went on the healing journey was that I had experienced narcissistic abuse. I was experiencing in the present what is called in the coaching industry complex PTSD. So PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is an actual disorder that a person can be diagnosed with. So you typically, veterans or people who've gone through extreme physical trauma will have experienced PTSD. And so there's another category, and this is not an actual diagnosis, it's just complex PTSD. And what that is if you've experienced like these smaller experiences of trauma over a long period of time. So it's not something as big as going to war. It's not something as big as being in a car accident or, something that really impacted you physically. It's just more, you had a parent who ignored you. You experienced emotional neglect. You experienced verbal abuse over 20 years of marriage. You experienced physical abuse in your marriage. Your ex cleaned you out financially and you were left in poverty and you really had to overcome that. Things like that cause a lot of anxiety. Basically, they put in a lot of triggers so that you don't really feel safe in your life. You don't really feel like you're okay. And that's what complex PTSD is. So it's not a direct, you can't really point to the sign. You just know that you have this feeling of unease, you feel a lot of shame, you feel a lot of pain, you feel a lot of anxiety. And so all of that are things that you need to heal from if you've experienced a divorce. Now, on top of experiencing narcissistic abuse or abuse in the marriage or emotional abuse, psychological abuse, on top of the childhood dysfunction, you actually need to heal from the divorce itself. Like if you say all these things happened before the divorce that you need to heal from, the divorce itself is an event that you need to heal from. And this is because divorce represents loss with a capital L. And if you've been through a divorce, you know that it feels like you experienced a death in your family, except that nobody comes with casseroles, right? Nobody asks you to help. Nobody sits with you and comforts you. In fact, people tend to tell you to get over it. People wonder why you put yourself and your children through that. On top of the loss of the relationship, no matter how bad it was, there's still a loss there. There's the loss of your identity as a married person. There's the loss of your routine. Some of you may have had to move houses. That's a loss. For a lot of people, like if you look at the Rahi stress chart, there is an actual study that's been done on the most stressful events in a person's life. Adding or losing a family member, moving, losing a job, starting a new job, all of these, and then divorce, except that divorce usually involves the other four. So you can imagine divorce itself is one of the top 5 or 6 events, but divorce typically also involves losing or gaining a job. Like if you're a stay-at-home mom, you had to get a job, or you might have lost a job because of the stress. You lost a family member because you got the divorce. You might have had to move in with other family members. You might have had to move house. Divorce represents so many losses. And there's the loss of your social circle that can happen. Friends that separate themselves because they're like, I really don't know how to handle this. The loss of your children's friends, your children's community, and the pain of watching them go through that. So some people lost their churches. There's just so much loss of status. It's just really a really hard thing to go through. And just the same way a person who loses a spouse to death goes through a grief cycle and has to heal through that grief, divorce requires healing through that whole process. It involves going through the same grief cycle that a person will go through if somebody died in their family, on top of healing from the abuse, the complex PTSD, healing from the anxiety. And then if you were married to a narcissist and then they created like all of this drama and pain in the divorce itself, you have that all on top of everything. And so no wonder you might wonder exactly what's going on. You might wonder why your life is so chaotic. You might wonder why you don't feel good. You might wonder why things seem hard. You might wonder why you get triggered so easily. You might wonder why you're anxious or angry or irritable. You might wonder why you procrastinate a lot of things. You might wonder why you have these like flashbacks of painful emotions like shame or rejection. You wonder why you might want to just isolate yourself. It's because you have this giant ball of baggage that comes with divorce that you need to work through. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, because sometimes a lot of people think, oh, everything's fine, I'm good, I can go into a new relationship, which is actually the half of my practice is on healing like this. And then the other half of my practice is helping my clients find new relationships, and I work with them to date. So I always check on the healing. I always say, what results are you getting? How are you in your emotions? Have you looked at your life when you were younger? How have you looked and processed what happened in your marriage? So if any of this resonates with your experience, I would love for you to put that in the chat. Just say, hey, yeah, this was kind of my experience, right? Or you divorced. Did you experience childhood dysfunction? Did you experience losses in your divorce? If any of that resonates with you, I want to know that, like, I'm hitting the things that you experience, so that I can kind of focus in on what really applies to you. So Donda says, amen. Yes, Donda. Michelle says all of the above. Good. And if you have questions along the way, go ahead and put them in there. I'll go ahead and answer those as well. So you understand why the topic of healing is so important. I know a lot of times it's kind of like, well, what do you need to heal from? You're fine, right? Like, you're not sick, you know, you're functioning, you're walking around. But from divorce, we're walking around, but we have all of these things hidden on the inside. And it can be really hard to find someone who understands. It can be really hard to find someone who understands why you would just, shut down with anger, why you would just not shut down with anger, shut down with anxiety. I remember when I went back to work, I was a stay-at-home mom before my divorce. And so after the divorce, I had to go back to work. And I remember I was so anxious at work. I went through so much anxiety. And of course, no one around me understood it, because, like, just do the work, right? Just get it done, right? And I remember, like, I would go into these meetings and my heart would be beating so hard. And it just took so much willpower to get myself to function in that new setting. Well, over time, as I worked on myself and worked on my healing and worked on my thoughts, and I worked with my coaches, and I actually still have a coach that I continue to work with to take me to the next level of feeling and healing. As I did that, my life actually really began to blossom. So since my divorce, at the time of the divorce, my kids were, gosh, how old were they now? So like 14 and 13, like right around that teenage year. Those teenagers where, it can be very challenging when teenagers are that age, right? But I was able to work with them. And of course, I worked with therapists and coaches with them too. I was able to help them kind of go through those years with everything that was happening with their dad and with the divorce, to the point that they're now both thriving. I have one who went off to college this year. The other one is a senior, also college bound. I went back into the workforce, transitioned back into the workforce. I worked on my thoughts about money, my anxieties around money. I was able to establish, like, a good lifestyle for my family. And beyond that, I started my own coaching business, which I'm now full-time in this coaching business. And I went back into the dating pool, which I know all of you know how interesting that is, and was able to figure out how to navigate that easily and without stress, and actually choose a healthy man to get married to. Because the biggest risk with that is that if you haven't healed, you're likely to repeat the cycle of your first marriage and pick somebody just like that, or somebody who's not quite what you want, maybe better than your ex, but not quite what you want. And this is actually one of the things that happens if you went through childhood dysfunction. One of the things that happens because you didn't heal from that childhood dysfunction is that you pick a spouse that reminds you or recreates your childhood environment. And I always tell my clients this story where my dad was actually very abusive physically to my mom, his first wife, and to my stepmother, whom he married the second time. So let's say he was over here with the physical abuse, right? And so I knew, okay, don't marry someone who's physically abusive, right? So I married my ex, who was over here. He was not physically abusive, but he was still narcissistic, right? What I didn't know, because I hadn't healed, was that where you want to go is here, where you have a man who is loving and healthy and has healthy boundaries and is self-aware and is kind and is loving and is stable. So I was trying to get here, but I didn't realize that this over here existed. So I just went from my dad to like here. And this is why healing is so important before you go into a new relationship, because you're trying to get over here. But because you haven't experienced that before, right, and you don't know what it feels like, you might stop short. So healing takes you to the place where you actually take yourself into a healthy state where being healthy and being with loving people feels normal. All right. So like I said, that's my story. Your results tell you whether you've healed or not, right? And actually, if you're following me on Facebook, I'm doing a series of posts about how to tell if you're really healed. Like I'm writing 30 things. I wrote 10 today. I'm going to put the other 10 out and the last 30 out on Friday that tell you if you've healed, so that you can look at your results. Otherwise, if you don't have those results, then you're probably in denial about your healing. And if you don't work on your healing, you won't have healthy relationships, your relationship with your career, your money. You might be numbing your feelings, the problems in your life with drinking or overeating or other addictions or with sex or with unhealthy relationships. There's so many things that can happen if you don't take the time to heal. So I want to start really by diving into some of the techniques that you can walk through to heal. But before I do that, I want to know if you have any questions so far. If there's anything like that isn't quite clear, anything you want me to clarify. I'm just going to read some of your comments. Cheryl says she's going to relate to all of it. Laurie says verbal and eventually physical abuse. He was a narcissist, story similar to mine. Yes. And you have anxiety triggered by little things. Absolutely. I totally have been there. Ruth says, no one can truly understand narcissistic abuse unless they go through it. Yes, girl, that is so, so true. It's like there's this little subculture of people who have experienced it and really understand what it's like. And if you try to explain it to somebody else, they don't get it. All right. Laurie said she experienced abuse and verbal abuse for years. And that will cause you to, if what you experienced was verbal or psychological abuse, you'll have a lot of self-doubt, a lot of indecision. You'll feel like you don't have options in life. You can't really go out with a lot of courage to do the things you want and get the things you want out of life. And this is so important, why you need to work through healing. So I'm going to describe one of the techniques that I use with my clients to help them heal. So this is what we call the inventory. If you've ever been to a 12-step group, they use something similar, except that with the 12-step groups, they don't do the emotional processing with you. They just help you do like listing, what they call the inventory, right? But listing your inventory isn't quite enough. You really want to process the emotions that went along with the inventory. And an inventory is just going through your childhood and listing the situations that impacted you the most. What are the painful memories that you have from your childhood? And one of the things you want to do with this is that you want to walk through this with somebody. It's really a good idea to walk through that with somebody, because you're so close to those memories and you're so close to those situations that you might actually use them to beat yourself up. Right? Which is not going to help you heal the situation. So what I do with my clients is we will sit down and we'll talk through their childhood. Typically, there's like 5 to 10 memories from childhood that come back to haunt on a regular basis. When that memory kicks in, you just feel shame in your body, you feel anxious, you feel like you're not good enough, you feel unworthy, or you feel pain, or the memory itself just causes you to feel awful about yourself. And there's usually about 5 to 10 of those memories that stand out. And I want you to kind of just put a yes in there if you can think of the memories. If for those of you that experience childhood dysfunction, if there are memories from your childhood that still kind of make you feel bad about yourself, just put a yes in there. You don't have to write the story. I don't want you to put that on there. Like 5, if there are memories that from your childhood that come back, right? So Donda says yes. Michelle says yes. Yes, I had those too. One of the ones that really stayed with me, gosh, really into my 30s was the day my parents separated, because my dad was actually beat my mom up that day, and it was so hard, and that memory always stuck with me and always came back, and I just always felt the anxiety and the shame from that day, even though I had nothing to do with it. So this is why childhood experiences are important to deal with, not because you did anything, but because they stay with you, because your brain, when you're a child, is so open, is so malleable. A child doesn't understand the difference between them and somebody else and who's doing what. Like the child takes on the anger from the abuser and takes on the pain that the victim is feeling. They take on everything. And that's why it just feels like it's a part of you. Cheryl says she had some, but overall had a good childhood. Awesome. So what we do with the childhood inventory is we walk through those painful memories and then we process the emotions. And this is the fun part. And when I say fun, this is where the work is. It's the art of letting the emotion from that incident come up so that you can feel it in your body and then let it go. But typically what we do when we haven't healed is because we suppress those emotions because it's so painful. It feels like you're going to die if you let those emotions come up. And after years and years and years and years of suppressing emotions, so you suppress the emotions from childhood. If you went through a difficult marriage, you probably suppressed a lot of emotions because if your ex was narcissistic, he had to be the drama king, right? He was the one who had all the emotions. He was the one who either got angry or was sad or had something to say about everything. And when you're with a person like that, there's no space for your emotions. There's no space for you to express what you want or what's hurting you or what's painful for you. You just have to stuff it. So on top of any childhood dysfunction, then there's also years of stuffing the emotions down from a difficult marriage. And so everything's kind of sitting in there. And really our brains only have so much capacity to hold it in before it starts to spill over. So you might start to find yourself depressed, or you might start to find yourself overly anxious. You might find yourself being angry with your kids. You might find yourself like just being on an emotional roller coaster. And so what you do want to do with the childhood inventory or your marriage inventory, or even just other things that happen in life. Sometimes you've experienced painful incidents that didn't even come from your childhood or your marriage, right? Some people experience sexual assault, all kinds of things. Like it could be from anywhere, right? And that it really just depends on the individual. You've stuffed it all in, and in order to truly heal and become healthy, you've got to let it out. You've got to let it out in a safe place, in a safe way. So Michelle says, so intense and reactive. Yes, right. You know, when you're like just, the emotions are just all the time. And then people around you ask you, well, what's your problem? Because to them on the outside, there's nothing wrong, but it's all these things that we've held in. So what I want to teach you is really how to process that emotion, how to sit with it, right? And it's interesting when I say sit with it, that is literally what you need to do, is sit with it. And this is why meditation is really good. It's a really good practice. Meditation by itself may not take care of all of it for you, but it's kind of related to this. When I work with my clients, when we're working through an emotion or a situation, I will encourage them to just sit, think of the memory, and not fight whatever emotion comes up. If you've been numbing for a very long time, that can be very hard. So it's kind of like a practice. And as the emotion comes up, if you feel a lot of pain or a lot of shame, then you want to give yourself love in that moment. And that can also be a challenge. Like I said, you know, this is the technique, but it's a practice. You have to learn the practice of it. And you have to learn to give yourself that love and compassion, which can also be hard because you may have spent a lot of years beating yourself up for not being able to function amazingly, even though you went through all of this. You may have spent a lot of time criticizing yourself. So that's one of the things that this going through a good healing process will do for you, is it will take away that mental chatter. All of those thoughts about how ugly you are, or how useless you are, or you can't ever do anything right. Words like, what's wrong with you? Or why does this always happen to you? If you have any of those that ever run through your brain on a regular basis, I want you to put yes in there, because I know I had a ton of that happening in my brain all the time. And when you have a lot of negative mental chatter, you're going to be exhausted. If you're experiencing exhaustion, fatigue at the end of the day, that is likely coming from all of that negative chatter. So when you do this work of sitting with your emotions, you want to love yourself so much. You want to give yourself love. You want to tell yourself, listen, this happened to you, but it's not your fault. You want to tell yourself, hey, this feeling is in your body, but you're going to be okay. I'm here for you. You want to learn the art of self-connection. So the first thing is sitting with the emotion, bringing up the memories. Sitting with the emotion is the first thing. The second thing is creating that self-connection, because when the emotion comes up, it's going to be painful. You're going to feel sad. You might even cry. You might go through a lot of grief. What you want to do is give yourself the comfort. And one of the things that really pulls people into relationships that are not healthy, especially after divorce, is that we're looking for that comfort. We're looking for someone to love us in the way that our parents were supposed to love us, but we didn't get it. We're looking for someone to love us in the way that our spouses in the old marriage were supposed to love us, but we didn't get it. We break that cycle by learning to give ourselves that love. That's how you break the cycle. You don't break that cycle by going to find somebody else to love you. You break the cycle by going through the healing process. And in the healing process, you become the parent that gives you that love. Does that make sense? Like you keep everyone where they are, and you sit with yourself and learn to give yourself love for all the painful parts of your heart. If you have questions about this, I want to be able to answer those questions for you, because this practice is so powerful. It's so powerful because then you don't have to rely on someone who might end up being unreliable to give you love, right? You don't have to rely on some random guy on a dating app. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a fan of dating apps. I met my husband on a dating app. I teach my clients how to use dating apps as well as meeting men in real life. I teach both of those really well. However, if you haven't healed, you have to give yourself that healing first. Otherwise, that's why you end up meeting a lot of jerks, a lot of creeps, a lot of liars on the dating apps, is because that healing process hasn't taken place. So a lot of self-love for yourself, a lot of compassion for what you went through, and a lot of self-connection. And it's a process and it's a practice that you can learn to do. Another thing that you really get out of that self-connection process is you stop feeling that sense of always being rejected. Like if somebody's always rejecting you, somebody in your family is always rejecting you, somebody at work is always rejecting your friends, you always feel separate from other people. That self-connection practice brings it home, where you stop feeling that. You create love and belonging and safety within yourself. So Cheryl said she's the queen of self-doubt. Yes. Lori says, yes, doubt. Michelle says, I have a hard time believing I deserve love. Me and you, girl, I have totally been there. And the rejection is so real, as well as abandonment. Yes. This is what this practice of processing the emotions and creating self-connection, this is what that does for you. It totally heals that hole. If you put that on someone else when they go away, or if they go away, or if they hurt you, or if they're not perfect, then you go back to being abandoned. But if you create the love and safety and connection for yourself, then you always have it, no matter what other people do. And it's such a freeing place to be. It's such an exciting place to be. Like, that's where real confidence comes from. That's where your real empowerment comes from. So I really encourage you to take on that practice. All right, so that's the emotional side of healing, right? The other side of healing is changing your thinking patterns. All right, give me a second. I'm going to drink some water. I had this really cute bottle that I got off of Instagram. It's the first thing I've ever bought on Instagram and tells me where I am with my drinking. So I love it. All right. Changing thinking patterns. So we talked about changing the emotions, right? That's the heavy part. Thank you, Cheryl. She says she loves the water bottle. That's the heavy part. I thought let's deal with that first. The first part is like the emotions, like all the anxiety and all of those things, right? The second thing I want to share with you, and I will talk about dating, right? Dating patterns too. But I want to talk about thinking patterns. Now, as a coach, this is so key to the work that I do, because how you relate to the world, how you do things in the world comes from the way you think, right? However, the way you think was programmed when you were a kid. Most of it was programmed when you were a kid. Then you have some more that was programmed in your marriage or as you've gone through life and adulthood and the culture, what you see on TV, what you've read, what you've heard, and what you've experienced has all informed the way you think. And if you look at your life and you look at the results that you're getting, do you like your results? Do you like the money that you have? Do you like the friendships that you have? Do you like the romantic relationships that you have? Do you like the way your health is, right? Do you basically like your post-divorce life? If there's any area where you don't enjoy your post-divorce life, your thinking patterns have a lot to do with that. So your thinking patterns coupled with your emotional patterns and triggers basically create the life that you have. And so as you process the emotions of the past, you also want to re-examine your thinking patterns in the present so that you can change them and so that you can create something completely new. So for instance, if you had a critical parent who criticized you a lot and your self-worth was low, if you heal that part of yourself, you want to change the part of your brain that's accustomed to critical thoughts so that your future results are 100% different. And if you've gone through divorce, there's typically some thinking patterns that you may have, and I'm going to list them. I think there's 10 of them that I'm going to list off really quickly that you might have and that may be affecting you. And so I want you to just take note of the ones that you need to change, the ones that you need to work on. And I'll go kind of slow. If you hear any that resonate with you, I want you to type it in the chat, okay? So the first thinking pattern is discounting the positive. When something good happens, you don't spend any time on it at all. It always feels like it's not enough. When you make some money, it's not enough. When something good happens, it's not enough. When your kids do something great, you're like, yeah, that's great, but what if, right? What about this and what about that? Think about your life right now. Chances are you could probably list 10 things wrong in your life right now very quickly. But can you also list 10 things that are going right? And when you wake up in the morning, what's foremost on your mind? The things that are going right or the things that are going wrong? Now, this doesn't mean you're broken. This is a perfectly human way of thinking. Our brains were designed to look for problems because when it found problems in caveman days, it meant it could keep you safe, right? So that is just a normal thing that everybody does. But if you've been through a divorce and if your divorce was difficult, that also like fuels that negative thinking or always looking for the negative, always looking for what's wrong and never spending any time in the positive. If you went through narcissistic abuse, feeling good may actually be painful for you. When something good happens, you might actually sabotage it because the feeling of experiencing good always brings anxiety that something bad is going to happen. So you might pull back from success, especially if you went through narcissistic abuse or you have complex PTSD. All right, so now the second one, so that's discounting the positive. The second one is taking things personally, always interpreting what other people do as having an impact on you. So if a friend says something or does something that you don't like, you think you've done something wrong. And so you're trying to fix yourself. You're always trying to change something about yourself so other people won't get angry, so that other people won't do things that hurt you or whatever. Shell says taking things personally. Yes, that's a big one. You're always interpreting other people's behavior as if as if that's going to impact you or your worth or define your worth. And this can show up in the workplace. It can show up at the office. It can show up when you're dating. It can show up when your ex is trying to do things or has shenanigans going on. So many people still have to deal with the ex and their shenanigans, right? Taking things personally is a thinking pattern that will keep you stuck. Another one is all or nothing thinking, also called black and white thinking, where you only, in any situation, you always think you only have two options. Your option is to stay and work overtime because your boss says so, or get fired. You can't see the in-between of being able to negotiate with your boss something that works better for you. Number 4 is rule following. Everything has to have a rule attached to it. You must do this. You must do that. Like you project the rules on yourself, or you allow other people to project rules on you, or you project rules on other people. And so there's always this, I don't know what you call it, like a power imbalance in all your relationships. One person either has all the power and you have to do what they say, or you have all the power and you're going to force other people to do what you say. And that always keeps you, a lot of times, especially if you have some codependency or people pleasing going on, that kind of keeps you obligated all the time to doing what other people want. Number 5 is overgeneralization. So I worked with a client today. So she's on a dating app and she's, going through certain conversations. So we have so many conversations she needs to go through so that she can meet the right person, right? And she was having some difficulty with it. And she said, well, I have to talk to so many people. And so it's hard. And so she was in overgeneralization there because so many people, I really just told her to talk to 10 people this week, right? But in her brain was making that a problem. Her brain was creating this like big thing out of it and generalizing that she had to talk to so many people. Another one is labeling, like labeling yourself bad. I'm bad, or I'm overweight. Just because you need to lose weight doesn't mean you're overweight, right? Doesn't mean you're ugly. Using labels to make yourself feel bad. Another one is mind reading, which is very closely attached to taking things personally. When people do things, you're not able to create that boundary between yourself and other people so that they can have their own life and you can have your own life. Whatever they do, you assume you know what they're thinking and you assume it has something to do with you. Mental filtering means when, and this is not the same as not seeing the positives. This is discounting the positive. Like you actually discount it. You actually like this positive thing is not good. You're literally flipping something positive into something negative. Number 9 is emotional reasoning. Like when you feel bad, you think something must be going wrong just because you feel bad. And that comes from not having that wide range of emotional processing that we talked about earlier. So things that you feel in your body feel like they're real in the world. But really, a lot of what you feel in your body is carried over from like years and years and years of stuff, right? And then the last one is catastrophic thinking. Always thinking that the worst case scenario, everything is going to be terrible. Everything is going to end up terribly. My son's going to end up in jail. My kid is going to be an addict. Like this is all these big, terrible things that are going to happen, maybe based on something small, right? So those are thinking patterns that could come from everything you've been through. If you have any of those, you can start to pick them out. You can start to see them on a daily basis so that you can really change your life. You can really go after some amazing goals if you can see the way your thinking is impacting your goals. Like I was talking to a woman the other day about her goals. We did a consult call, right? And she wanted to work with me and I was there answering questions for her for about an hour. And I was showing her the options in her life. I was like, listen, here are the options that you have for work. Here's how you can make more money. Here's how you can think about your new relationship, right? But she had a lot of these thinking patterns. She had a lot of them. One of them was the all or nothing thinking was, I said, you know what, would you like to make more money? How would you like to make money? She was like, oh, I don't want to work overtime. In her mind, she either couldn't make any money or she had to work overtime. She couldn't see that in between, she had this amazing photography talent where she could have maybe done that on the side and not have to work overtime. And she could have done that with her kids. So that difficulty seeing options, always thinking, I don't have any options, there's nothing I can do, all of that will hold you back from achieving your goals in business, achieving your goals with building your post-divorce life, achieving your goals in your relationship. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Michelle says, taking things personally. Donna says, rule following, everything must be just so. Yes, Michelle says, yes. Cheryl says, I see many of these thinking patterns within myself. Yes, Cheryl, you are perfectly normal. These are very human thinking patterns. I don't know that there's any human who doesn't have some of these, but when you've been through divorce, it really, really solidifies them and tends to go to the extreme in a way that impacts your life negatively and keeps you stuck. All right, let me know what questions you have before we talk about the last one. I do want to take a moment to talk about specifically detaching emotionally from the ex. Detaching emotionally from the ex, and I don't know if there's anyone on who specifically has that. We might be able to go into that a little bit deeper. But detaching emotionally from your ex requires fixing your emotional processing as well as fixing your thinking pattern. It always requires those two. And I know that's a big one for divorce. Is some people, you have your ex is always coming after you in court, or maybe he doesn't pay his child support like he's supposed to, or he's always like kind of harassing you or complaining or blaming you even after the divorce, right? So I'm going to use that example to show you how you can take the emotional processing plus the thinking patterns and really create a new situation. So an example is someone who is trying to co-parent, right, peacefully with her ex, but her ex is narcissistic. So of course he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. He doesn't show up on time to pick up the kids, or he might not show up for 3 or 4 of his visits to pick up the kids. He won't tell her ahead of time that he's going to do that, right? And so every day that the kids are supposed to be picked up, she doesn't know if he's going to show up or not. And if she tries to ask him, hey, are you going to come this Friday or not? Then he kind of goes after her and says, you're always nagging, blah, blah, blah. You make things so difficult. And really, in a sense, verbally abuses her by text, right? Now, this is a real person. This is a real case study, someone that I have worked with. And so what this lady would do in the past was then she would bend over backwards to be extremely polite and like make sure her text didn't have anything that could set him off, right? Or she wouldn't ask for what she needed to do. Or she wouldn't go after him for child custody because then he would accuse her of being difficult. And so she was living her life, taking care of the kids as best as she could, and then having to go through all of these mental gymnastics to make her ex happy, even though he was the one who wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. So when I worked with her, we did 2 things. The first thing I did was we did emotional processing. She had experienced a lot of anxiety in her childhood, and she had experienced a lot of anxiety from the narcissistic abuse. So the first thing we did was a lot of emotional processing of the anxiety. Let the anxiety come up, right? Feel it in your body. Did you die? You didn't die, right? She got able to tolerate the anxiety that came up when her ex would send her something accusatory. She got comfortable with it. She's like, oh, okay, this anxiety that I'm feeling in my body, it's just in my body. It's just ones and zeros going up and down my spine and my nerves. I don't have to do anything based on the anxiety. And once she got comfortable with that, after a lot of emotional processing, then the next thing we did was say, okay, how do you want to think about your ex when he sends this to you? So instead of kind of a trigger response to his messages, she was able to look at it logically. She stopped labeling herself difficult. Just because he said she was difficult didn't mean she was difficult. She started being able to see the difference. He said she was difficult. She said, is what I'm doing difficult? No, I'm just checking to see if he's picking up the kids. That is not being difficult. And so once she started not taking things personally, right, she was able to then respond to him in like a very logical, mature way, instead of bending over backwards and people pleasing and letting him like spin her in circles with his words. She was able to respond logically. So can you see how those two go together in the healing? And the results that she started getting was setting better boundaries with the ex, feeling more peaceful as she co-parented. He continued to do his drama, but it wasn't affecting her anymore. All right. So Ruth, I see that you have your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question, or did you want to come on for coaching when we're done? Just pop that in the chat, and then I will, we might be able to talk about, see if there's enough time for that. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about is when you don't heal your emotions, right? And you haven't healed your thinking patterns, dating can be super challenging. Oh, Ruth, you didn't make, okay, yeah, totally fine. I just wanted to check in with you. I just wanted to make sure if you had something, I was willing to accommodate. Not a problem. All right, so when you haven't healed thoroughly in these two areas, then your dating life will be so stressful. So stressful. One of the things that happens is that you come to the dating process without a very confident, solid sense of self, because you still have all these things going on. You still have all these thoughts all over the place. You still have all these emotional reactions and triggers and fears and anxieties, and all of that chaos is still going on. So when you come to the dating process, it's really easy to be manipulated when you have that going on. It's really easy to get confused. It's really easy to go down 3 months with somebody only to find out that they weren't the right person for you, because you didn't have your own boundaries in place. You didn't have your own emotional centeredness really solid. You didn't have your own ability to really critically look at other people. All of that wasn't in place before dating. And so what ends up happening is you meet people and it takes you a long time to figure out that this is not the right person because you don't know what's going on inside of you. Like, you're still being yanked around. You don't have a sense of self. You don't know what you like, what you dislike. You don't know what brings you joy. You don't know how to respond. You're so anxious that you want the person to love you, that you put up with behaviors that you shouldn't put up, or you still have blind spots based on the thinking patterns. You minimize their behavior, or you rationalize the behavior because you're not solid in your thinking patterns. So these are some of the scenarios you probably face if you're dating without being healed. One is you have a relationship that starts hot and heavy, like, oh my God, from the first day, the guy's funny, he's charming, he loves you. You're like totally sold. You're totally head over heels in love on the very first date. And it turns out to be a flash in the pan. You know, if it gets hot and heavy, you might even go into bed with the person, and it turns out to be a hookup, even though you believe that you were meant for each other, and all of a sudden the guy disappears. Or he calls you 2 weeks later for another hookup, and then you realize, oh, this is all he ever wanted. Because at the beginning, you didn't know the signs of a relationship that was going to turn out to be a flame out, or your emotional roller coaster was still going because you hadn't solidified your sense of self and confidence to just wait, slow it down and wait, and really hold that tension to really see who the real person is before committing to the person. A lot of times I talk to ladies about taking your time. Like, you can date multiple people until you commit to a person verbally that, okay, we're going exclusive together, right? And a lot of their concerns are that I don't want to seem like I am cheating, or I don't want to seem like I'm, playing games by dating multiple people. Well, this is a thinking error, right? Because they feel this is one of those rules that can sabotage you. Some women feel like once they meet someone on a first date, they're committed to that person. They have a rule. You can only talk to one guy at a time. And because of that rule, when they meet one person, they commit to that person, they date that person for 3 months, find out that that person isn't right for them, break up, date another person for 3 months. And I was having a conversation with a couple of ladies this week. And I said, if you do that, you're only going to date 4 people a year. It's going to take you forever to find the right guy, because sometimes it's a numbers game. And so you can see where like understanding these dating patterns can be really important. So you have, sometimes you end up in these relationships that start hot and heavy and then they disappear. Or you end up with a fantasy relationship, a relationship that's just entirely in your head. It's a really cute guy at church, and he smiles and says hello to you every Sunday. And then you spend Monday through Saturday thinking about this guy. He's never asked you out. He, hasn't ever said he's interested in you, except on a platonic basis. Maybe you meet at the, potluck at church. I'm just making this up, right? But you have all of these thoughts throughout the week, just thinking about him all the time. So that can be, you can find yourself in a fantasy relationship. You might find yourself in a relationship where you only accept crumbs from the other person because you really haven't healed your sense of self. You might be too scared to step out to date. And so it makes it really hard for you to create those nurturing relationships because you're hiding away from anxiety. Another toxic dating pattern is when you're doing all the work in the relationship. You're the one giving all the time and you're going over the top in hopes that the person will love you. Another toxic dating pattern is tolerating guys who are abusive, who are overly critical, who are sarcastic, who put you down. Maybe always wanting the guy to chase you, always being in this like high school immature relationship sense. A lot of women find themselves in that, where it's just they act like the drama queen because they want the attention, but they don't actually take the time to solidify in a serious relationship and create a healthy relationship. You might find yourself always being friends, like you just always find yourself in that being friends scenario. Or you have these guys who will always create this triangle where they're there, but then there's always like 2 women in the picture all of the time. These are all scenarios. Getting lied to on a dating app and not being able to see it, not being able to see if a guy is lying. All of those types of scenarios when you're dating will happen, and they can happen once or twice. But if you're constantly recycling some of these scenarios, it's a sign that you haven't truly healed. And the reason it shows up as you haven't truly healed is because you are not accustomed to a healthy romantic relationship. If you're accustomed to a healthy romantic relationship, you will immediately be able to see that all of these scenarios are not healthy. It will be very, very clear to you. And healthy relationships, healthy dating relationships actually look like each person is self-responsible. Each person takes care of their own personal growth. There's empathy, there's vulnerability, there's good communication. The person is actually interested in you, wants to spend time with you, is attentive. You enjoy being with them. You don't have all this anxiety when you're dating. If you're experiencing a lot of anxiety while dating someone, that's not a good thing. Healthy relationships don't have all of that anxiety happening in them. Another sign that you are in a healthy relationship is that you are actually able to express yourself without anxiety. Not like anxiety like you're scared, but you're able to ask for what you want. Let me put it that way. You're able to say, hey, I would love for you to text me during the week. I really like it if we spend time communicating with each other throughout the week. And you give the person the opportunity to meet that need. And if they don't meet the need, you're perfectly okay with walking away, right? Now, I don't know how many of you on here are actually actively dating after your divorce. If you have questions around dating, I would love to answer those for you. I'm going to run down this list of the signs of a healthy dating partner for you. I'm just going to go through it quickly because we are about out of time. But if you have questions around dating, or if you have thoughts around dating, I want you to go ahead and just pop those in. So I'm going to just run down the list because I opened it real quick. 1, the signs of a healthy dating partner: he's 100% single and available for a relationship, right? He looks forward to seeing you and spending time with you. He enjoys being with you and is eager to do it again. He's sorry to leave you at the end of the date. He's interested in you, interested in your life and in your story. He asks questions. He wants to be helpful. He's kind and considerate of you. There's chemistry between you. Now, I don't mean the hot and heavy, like, feeling each other up on the first date, but you are reasonably attracted to the person. You're not repelled by the person, let me put it that way. He expresses that he thinks you are unique and special, part of showing interest. He's patient and willing to take things slow. He shares about his own life and his own story so that you can learn about him. He's open-minded and willing to think and grow in new ways, has self-awareness so that and the reason self-awareness is so important is that you don't want to be responsible for another person's feelings, right? That's another skill you need to learn as part of healing, is to be responsible for your feelings and let the other person be responsible for theirs. This person will have clarity around mental and spiritual wellness, will be open to growth, whether it's counseling, coaching, books, or programs. The person will be transparently honest. You don't just want a person that is honest. You want a person that has nothing to hide. Takes care of their own finances and is stable. Not necessarily, you don't have to say the person needs to be rich, but at least their bills are paid. He's interested in building towards a committed relationship. The person is compatible with you about commitment, your timeline, children, religion, politics, personal values, and geography. So someone who lives within reasonable distance that you can build a relationship. And then, like I said earlier, time with him is enjoyable and anxiety-free for you. All right, so that really covers the areas of healing that you need to work on. Your emotional healing, your thinking patterns, and your dating patterns. All right, Laurie says, I find out I put up with more behaviors than I should because I'm not healed, and setting boundaries is hard for me. Yes. So Laurie, the reason setting boundaries is hard for you is because your emotions, your emotional life, your emotional groundedness, you're not independent in that. Like your emotions are still dependent on another person's response. So if you said, maybe you went on a date with someone and maybe you were not comfortable with them kissing you at the end of the day. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there, right? You might have trouble saying that because you don't want them to think less of you. You might have trouble saying that because you don't want them to reject you. And so because that feeling of being grounded is shaky inside of you, setting boundaries will be hard, right? Putting up with behavior. So if a person goes 3 days without texting you for like no reason, or they lie about it, you might find yourself giving them one more chance, and one more chance, and one more chance. But all of this gets taken care of as you walk through your past. You'll see the same patterns of not setting boundaries in your other relationships. So as you walk through and heal your past and heal the things that happen in your marriage, you will find that all of that will heal up those boundaries, and you'll be able to set them. You'll get stronger. You'll be more courageous. You will actually be able to go after some amazing things. You'll be able to elevate the level of guys that you date, because you won't put up with put up with the losers anymore. And actually those losers tend to very quickly recognize the type of woman that won't put up with that behavior very quickly. So you actually won't be spending a lot of time trying to deal with those kinds of guys. All right. So that is the whole webinar. Thank you all for joining. I do want to make an offer to you. If this is work that you feel like you need to do, based on what we've talked about, I would love to offer you a free coaching call, right? It's a 45-minute call. I take these concepts and I apply to your specific situation. And after helping you apply to your specific situation, if you're interested in working with me on an ongoing basis, then we talk about that at the end of the call as well. The call is confidential. It is not a bother to me. I know a lot of people feel like, listen, it's a bother. I don't want to bother her. I don't want to take her time. It is not a bother to me. This is part of my work. This is part of my life. And I want to give you the opportunity to see how I work so that you can make the decision to work with me on an ongoing basis. Like, healing from your divorce is so, so important. And I'm proof that when you do that work, life is just so amazing on the other side. And like, if I could do it, listen, I know that any one of you could do it, because it wasn't like I knew instantly how to do any of this. I had never heard the word codependency or all of that until my divorce had actually happened. So it was after my divorce that I went back and did all of this work, and that created all of this amazing success that I have. So it's not unique to me. My clients are experiencing it, and I know that you can experience it as well. So I am going to put, thank you, Donda. I love working with you too. So I am going to, right after this webinar, you should have received that email. In the email is a link to my calendar. Just go on there and pick a time. There's no cost to that. And I'm actually going to put it in the chat as well, where you can actually just copy it and book a confidential consultation call with me. And we can talk about really taking this and turning your life around. And I want to build the belief in you that you can do it. And if you have questions around that, we can talk about that too. So before, all right, I put the link. I think that link should work in the chat box. So you can copy that and paste that into your browser. I want to answer any questions that you have, or take one person to maybe coach for 5 minutes before we go. So if you do want to be coached live, go ahead, and at the bottom of your screen, there is a raise hand button, or just ask. Oh, you don't see the link? That is interesting. Nope. So I posted it, but obviously it's not showing it to everyone. That is interesting. Okay, so okay. So what I'm gonna do is, do you see other people's comments? It might be the way I set this up. I may have set it up so that you don't see it. It's just shadicurry.com/schedule-appointment. Oh, you know, here it is. Okay, now I see. All right, I did that wrong. All right, I'm gonna do it again. I only sent it to panelists, so only I could see it. This will be better. So it's shadicurry.com/schedule-appointment. All right, try clicking on that and see if that takes you to my calendar, and you can just grab a time for us to talk. There it is. Awesome. Yeah, I had my chat was set to just all panelists and not panelists and attendees. So, all right, Laurie, you have your hand up. So I am going to click allow to talk, and I think I'm going to promote you to panelist. And what that's going to do, just so you know, is that you're going to appear on the screen with me when that happens. Okay? And then everybody will be able to hear you talk. So Laurie, promote to panelist. So you're going to rejoin. Here we go. All right, Laurie, you are on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining the webinar. It's good to have you on.
It's good information.
Very welcome. How can we apply this to your situation?
A lot of it made sense to me. And, you know, I thought I wasn't doing that bad, but then everything you mentioned was like, oh yeah, I'm still having that problem. I'm still having that problem.
Right.
So, I mean, and I'm in counseling, you know, so it's like, at what point do you go past the counseling? You know what I mean?
What is
So
the
it's,
one change you think you'd like to see? Like, what is the area of impact that if I could just change this, this would be awesome?
um, the setting boundaries things I've been working at, and I've managed to deal with my ex narcissist. Like, I don't talk to him at all. We email each other, but every time I see his name and pop up in the email, it triggers anxiety. Like every time I see his name, it's like, oh geez, what does he want? But that is like the most of it. I've learned to deal with those feelings. It's the
Yeah.
dating, trying to date new people.
Okay.
And it's like, because I took so much stuff from him over the 22 years we were married, it was like, you know, like you said, you learn to push down your emotions because they're very emotional and they're always right. And it's not worth the fight. And so you just deal with it. And so then I find I'm still accepting behaviors that aren't, like what I would tell my friend, not don't put up with that, you know, but I'm like, well, you know, it's better than nobody, or well, at least, you know, and it's like, why am I doing that to, like, you know, and I'll
Right.
have days of really clarity and I'll be like, I'm not putting up with that. And then I'll talk to him, I'll be like, oh well, it's all right, you know, and it's like, it's not all right, you know. I mean,
Right.
why do I let it slip? Because of the past and I've let it slip for so long, you know, or like, how do you, I mean,
Right. So this is one of the things that I do with my clients when they're dating is I really just, I take them through a whole process of dating. So this is just one piece of it that I'm going to
Okay.
kind of use here. One of the things would be really having a clear idea of what they want. So, and I don't know if you've been through any of my dating challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you know when I talk about having a clear idea of what you're looking for. So that's one piece, right? But then the other piece is holding yourself accountable to your goal of dating.
Right.
So you might be with this person who shows up a certain way that's good enough for maybe the next date, but not good enough for the relationship that you want. And what happens when you minimize the behavior is you've forgotten that you're looking for this.
Yes.
Like, are you wanting to get married? Like, what's your ultimate goal?
No,
That's fine. Whatever it is.
I don't think so. Like, honestly, I'd like to find somebody who, you know, who we just have a good time together. And I'm not talking about just sex. I'm talking about like going out and doing things together and doing things in public together. I don't, after being married 22 years and all that, I'm not 100% sure I want to rush into it. I mean, yes, I don't want to be alone. I want someone to share my life with, but and I'm not, I
Right.
mean,
And
if
so
it
that's
ended
the
up going into
clarity.
marriage, that would be different. But that's why I'm saying,
But that's the clarity that you need, because some people just want a long-term partner, you know, like Oprah and
right.
Stedman, right?
Yes.
So like everybody gets to choose whatever they want. But think about it. Oprah and Stedman have a standard.
Yes.
They're not married, but there is a standard to their relationship. What you need to do is create that standard. And you have to create it in a way that's super effective. It can't be wishy-washy, and it can't be a standard that you're projecting things on the other person. It's a standard that you hold for yourself. And then you hold yourself, or you hire a coach to hold you accountable to find that standard.
Okay.
So even though you're not looking for a husband, you're looking for a long-term partner. What does that kind of person look like? What does he do? How does he treat you? What do you know, what does he say? And then when you get clarity around that, it makes it so much easier for you to set that boundary. But because now you're just kind of like, well, I just don't want to be alone. I just want someone for the next date. Well, then of course, any guy is good enough for that.
I mean, I don't want to say I want to rush into another relationship because I really haven't, I've only dated 2 people. So in like 2.5 years. So
Right.
you know,
But the
it's just been
healing,
hard. I've been trying to heal myself.
the way the
And
healing helps you with that is that it gives you like this bigger vision for your life. You get in touch with your bigger purpose. As a woman, you get in touch with like your bigger vision, how you want to live. And then you're able to create that clarity of the kind of person that fits into that life.
okay.
Versus just going on the app and picking
Right.
somebody and then seeing if he fits.
Yes.
So it's kind of like you have a round hole, you just grab any peg, you see if it fits, maybe you spend 3 months and then you toss it. That one doesn't work, grab another one. But what happens is if you're like, oh, this is a round hole, okay, then you look and you find a round peg and you put it in.
Yeah.
So it's that clarity and that standard, and then really being able to work with the emotions that come up along the way, because you might feel lonely. The beauty about that is that you can heal that loneliness and that abandonment while you're waiting for your round peg to come, to be there. And if, so the dating process itself can be a healing process because it really lets you see who you are. It helps you clarify what you want out of life, not just for the next month, but for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Was that helpful?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Lori, I'm going to send you back to, how do I do this? Make host. I don't know how to send you back to attendee. Okay, well, we'll just say goodbye with you on the screen there because I don't want to kick you out of the call.
Here, I'll stop video.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. This has been an amazing experience talking with everyone. Thank you for the questions and your participation. Make sure you book a call with me. I would love to talk to each and every one of you about your situation and coach you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye.